Just a last announcement before we start. There are handouts if anyone hasn't gotten them, 2 sheets each on either side of the classroom. Yes, we'll go ahead and begin. Can everyone hear okay? Thank you, everyone, for sticking around on such a beautiful day in Seattle for our topic. And the topic here today is a decade after Dayton, looking at the future impact of technology in our law schools. Yesterday's speaker, Clay Shirky, at the plenary session said something very interesting. He said the great thing about talking about the future is that no one can check your work. Well, today we actually are going to check the work of a report, and we're going to look actually at the future of technology through the lens of a report that was written in 1993, published by the University of Dayton School of Law and Mead Data Central, looking at the decade ahead, so from 1993 to 2003, and the changes that they thought would be coming to legal education. And today we have with us, I'm very fortunate to have 3 speakers who are futurists, who can talk to the questions that I've posed to them, which are what came true in the Dayton report, what didn't come true, what came true that wasn't even foreseen in the Dayton report, and what lessons can we draw, and then finally to make bold predictions for the next decade. I have handouts because I really want this to be, and one of the handouts is a quick survey, because I really would like this to be interactive in the sense that I'd like to see what predictions everyone here in the audience might have for us today. So I don't want you to stop listening to our speakers, but in between pauses when we're changing PowerPoint slides, if you could fill those quick surveys out and send them forward during our question and answer period, which we'd like to have at the end. We'd like to look at some of the comments and bring those up in the discussion. So our first panelist today is Marian Parker. Actually, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let me jump back a second. There was an extensive group of contributors to the Dayton report, and let me just see a show of hands. Who has actually seen the Dayton report or referred to it at some point? Very few people in the audience. For some of us, for myself, the Dayton report was a beacon that was kind of shining the way, and something that I used as the IT director at Hastings Law School for the direction that we were moving in. And so I think it's important for us to think about the future. If anyone would like to see a copy of the report, it's online at the Legal Information Institute, and there's a link on the handouts that I've given to you. You can also email me, and I'll send you a PDF that I've created. The purpose of the report in 1993 was that because the University of Dayton was thinking about building a new facility, and they wanted to think about the future of technology in their planning. So that was their motivation, and throughout the report they talk about the impacts in various constituencies. They talk about how it's going to impact teaching, to how technology will impact the law library. There's a great deal about that. And also technology, how it's going to impact the infrastructure of the law school in the future. So those three emphases will be addressed separately by each of our panelists today. The first panelist we have today is Marian Parker, who's the director of the Professional Center Library at Wake Forest and professor of law at Wake Forest University School of Law. Marian also has an extensive background that I found on this website, listing her experience with Mead Data, although prior to this report that we're going to be talking about today, and also then afterwards. So Marian has an extensive experience both in the academic world and in private work as well. So Marian will address the issues of the library, and specifically the, quote, change model that was predicted in this report, whereby through a three-phase process, law libraries were going to get rid of all their hard copy collections in 10 years by scanning all of the historical material that wasn't available online. So that's the first prediction that or first area that we'll think about. So, Marian, let me get your...
Like to write on tablets, as it were. First thing I'm going to do, oh, thank you. Everybody's had to deal with the microphones today. We're going to cover three particular areas while I talk. And do I have? That's what I thought. Okay, we're going to do it. We're going to talk about where we were, where we are now, and be really bold and talk about where we're going. Dayton really talked for the library portion of this report about the change model, and it spoke about libraries going through three phases. Phase one, where the library would be mainly books with some e-resources available to users as supplements to the book material. Phase two, where almost all of the primary sources would be available to users in e-versions only, and where all the secondary sources would still be available as books, and people would have to come to the library to use those materials. And phase three, where basically everything, everywhere, would be available only electronically. And so people wouldn't actually need to come to the library at all. Here's where I believe we are, and I'm more than glad for any of you to jump in at any point, not only when I talk about where we are today, but especially when I talk about where we're going, although there's going to be time for everybody to jump in at the end of the three presentations. We all agree that we've all passed phase one, even when the Dayton report was written. We all had books, we all had Lexis and Westlaw, and maybe some other things. I believe that phases 2 and 3 have already been melded in most of our libraries, if not every one of our libraries. We are still clinging to primary sources in print, even though we have virtually everything in the primary source area available on one online service or another, through government websites or through other subscriptions that we can get. And we are adding secondary sources in electronic versions as supplements to what we hold in print. We also can say that almost all currently published legal information is available electronically if we want to get it, or if we can afford to get it, or if we have time to go find it in various government websites. Much historical information is still available in print, though this is changing dramatically And that's changing either by the government publishing it, by the publishers of the secondary information publishing it, by libraries making digital copies of items they own. And the collection mix, I believe, depends more on the users for that particular library, for each particular library, and the budget available to the person responsible for doing the collection for the library. And I see this continuing. Well, this is where we are. I'm getting ready to talk about the rest in a minute. The Dayton report talked a lot about each library having its own library network, that library network needed to interact with the SuperNet, or I guess now we have referred to it as the information highway for a while, which is really the web that we all have access to all the time. It talked a lot about collections of CDs being really critical, and also talking about libraries as publishers of digital information. It really didn't talk about the role that the GPO was going to play, and I would say of all of those things, you know, we're all depending on the web. We do have networks at our school, but I don't think most libraries are having their own little network that then has to interact. I think it's more global to the school and to the university. CDs were an intermediate storage medium. I found it interesting today when Rutgers was talking about they're actually storing some of their digital information on CDs rather than, you know, storing it on a server somewhere. I think limited numbers of libraries are being digital publishers, but it's not pervasive in any way, shape, or form throughout the law library world. And GPO is going to be playing a huge part. Where are we going? In 1987, I worked on an R&D group when I was working with Lexis. And there were things that we predicted absolutely had to happen or the company would be going out of business. Some of those things came true. Some of them didn't. We believed that everything needed to be walk up and use, that there needed to be almost no instruction. And in some ways that has come to pass, and in some ways not. We do find ourselves doing more training in the schools of different types of information because of how it's organized, but everybody now knows how to sign on to the web and get to something and use it. So there's no training anymore for that kind of activity. We believe that artificial intelligence was going to make it absolutely possible for everybody to do anything, and we wouldn't have to think a whole lot anymore. Well, that's not true. That's not true. Of course that's not true. Our keynote speaker on the first day said there would be no structure put in. You would see by the online services that actually more structure has been made available to people so that people have a choice of how to go interact with the information. We believe that you'd be able to walk up and talk to anything to get what you needed, and that has not come to pass in general, though there is more sophisticated voice recognition interaction now, and Ron actually was just talking about how he can talk to his little tablet computer. We also, at that time, 1987, it was a long time ago, believed that everything needed to be linked. Well, the World Wide Web made all of that possible. And the other thing that we believed was that, you know, computer screens were going to actually end up being large like your desk, and you can move all of your documents around on it. Well, computer screens aren't large, but you can move documents around and see more than one thing so that it's like working on a table, pulling all the law books out. 4 minutes? Okay. In the Dayton report in 1993, there were several topics that they mentioned that all of us working in libraries were going to have to think about. Let me give you the overview and then a couple of examples of where I think we have or have not met the predictions. Dayton talked about the infrastructure in the library, computer labs, staffing, imaging, hard copy collection, and the role of the library in the information age. As far as the infrastructure goes, I already spoke to the fact that I do not believe that most libraries have a separate small library internet that has to interact with everybody. I think you do find those, but it seemed to be a really large emphasis in the report, and I think it's a really small part of our community. They did predict that all nets would be internetworked, and of course, that absolutely is our world. They also predicted that all books would be moved to some remote locations and or compact storage, and it has not happened. I know there are more books published every single day that we go by, more titles, so we're not there yet. Maybe some libraries will be there. They talked about it was going to be expensive to get both book and online, and they were right on the mark with that, without any question. And the big prediction about dispensing with all hard copy by the end of Phase 2 hasn't happened, isn't going to happen across the board for every library. It very well may happen for some libraries. That is going to be library dependent and source type dependent. We'll talk about a couple of examples in a minute. They talked about that we would actually have budget relief when we went all digital. Wrong. Totally and absolutely wrong. But we should be paying for the information because we're paying for the intellectual content, not what it's published on. And in fact, we all have more functionality when we're dealing with a digital version of any of the documents than we're dealing with the paper version. So we're not getting budget relief, and I don't see any on the horizon, to tell you the truth. The need for space would become stable or decrease because we were going to digital. And that, in fact, would be true. I think many of us are opting to choose digital formats because we know there's never going to be another square inch in the particular library. So not only is the medium more functional, but it alleviates some pressure so that we can keep those print materials that we absolutely need to keep. We talked about computer labs. We talked about computer labs becoming dinosaurs. They're not, but they're changing. Most schools are still keeping some teaching function, at least for some time to come. I believe that's going to be true. The need for a big lab because nobody has a computer, that's gone away already. The issue of staffing is that, yes, we're all more sophisticated. That is absolutely part of what we've had to become, is more technology savvy in both what we use and how we use it. The role of the library is that we are going to, at least in the law schools, and that's what we're talking about, the students still come to use the library, not necessarily to get to the information, but it is a communal center, and they also are not as sophisticated in the use of all of this information, whether it's digital or print, as we might like to think they are. So they are still coming to the library for help, for instruction, and for study. And last but not least, I need to talk about everybody knows that prices will not decrease. Users do have access outside the library. Students still come, as I said. libraries are still being built and expanded. We have a wonderful example in this building in which we're standing. I already mentioned that I do think that the differences are going to be in the different type of libraries. We are going to have all digital libraries, but we are going to have libraries like Harvard and Columbia and Wake Forest, where we have specialized collections in North Carolina, where we're going to keep those collections, and Harvard's going to keep its special collections. And I will finish with a quote from Eric's dean that was published in Law Library Journal in volume 95, where Mary Kay Kane says, as can be seen from the areas that she discussed, the challenges identified for libraries in this future are not entirely new. They are the same old problems of funding, staffing, space, and planning, simply evaluated against the background of what technology has to contribute to or take away from the potential solutions. Thus, I do not think that you need to be a computer whiz to be the head of the modern law school library. Rather, you need merely to have superhuman powers to see into the future and stay ahead of the fast-paced changes that we are witnessing to help your institution make the most of the opportunities that exist. And I think she said it very well for what's going to happen in libraries. We have to anticipate the future so that we can be there for our users. Thanks.
Thank you, Marian. And if my dean is listening on the web, I didn't bribe Marian to read that quote. Next with us is Ron Stout. Let me get my presentation up here a second. Ron is a professor of law at Chicago-Kent College of Law and the vice president for law, business, and technology. And in looking around the web, I found a very interesting quote. Ron on one of the Harvard websites, Ron said, "I am set to do 10 years in 10 minutes." And I thought that was perfect for this session because that's what we're doing, 10 years in 10 minutes for each of the panelists. Ron is here to address the impact of technology on the faculty as projected in the Dayton report, and specifically to answer whatever happened to electronic casebooks and the impacts that were projected on teaching, specifically using technology. So, Ron, let me, and if people have filled out your survey forms, please go ahead and send those forward. We'll collect those during the question and answer period.
Thank you. And I did stand up in front of 500 or 600 law faculty members about this time and say that paper is dead and electronic casebooks would replace all those heavy books we carried around. I even tried to invent one, so I didn't know that Eric was going to sort of stick it to me that way. Exactly. But I'll try to deal with it. Eric did a wonderful job of pulling this together. I had one other sort of compliment I wanted to offer. As I read the Dayton report again in preparation for today, I was struck by how it really was the Peter Martin report, because Peter had made a long written contribution to Lindy Carl and Bob McConnell and the others, and he's quoted throughout the thing, and his insight is really the sort of the core of many of these things that we found in the report. How are we doing this with the click? Okay. I certainly am, but I think you are all technology optimism recidivists. Or you wouldn't be here. You'd be out there in that beautiful sunlit afternoon enjoying the sound or going on another boat ride or enjoying this fabulous weather. And this is just sort of a history of my attempts at sort of changing the world or thinking the world was going to change because some technology had emerged that I thought was fabulous. In 1978, we started to do document assembly for middle-income people in a project funded by Klepper to expand the funding base for clinical education. And I thought, lawyers are going to be obsolete, at least a whole bunch of them, because this technology is so fabulous, it'll be able to do perfect documents based on expertise that's the best possible practice and so on. And then we started the Computer Center in 1984, and I had this Mindstorms idea that we're going to wander around in computer digital space and never see a book again, and I have an anecdote about that later. And we were going to be able to see relationships and work in a whole new way, and we don't really work in a whole new way. We do a lot of things different, but we don't work in a whole new way. The Law School of the Future, 1992, we had the Law School of the Future at Chicago-Kent, and it looks like an antique compared to this place, doesn't it? Isn't this a fabulous place? It's just amazing. And I don't even know what half of the things, that Jonathan explained were in these classrooms are. And they're everywhere and pervasive and fabulous and beautiful. I spent some time at Lexis in 1994 and 1998 on leave. I kept tenure. Always keep tenure when you go into the private world. And there I built sort of software suites because Windows was new, and I thought, well, this is going to take over the world. And then we began this process of the web becoming pervasive and powerful, and I convinced them they had to go to the web, and we built web-based Lexis Research, and that was going to change the world. All these things have that sort of center to them. And today I'm working on this justice, technology, and education trio. And I'm convinced that there are vast untapped resources in our law schools and students and others who can help solve the problems of delivering legal services to the poor if we use some of the technology advances that Dayton predicted and have come true in other ways. And I'll get back to that quickly at the end and take some of John's time to tell you about it. So here are my perspectives, my three pieces. Perspectives on the Dayton report. A little bit of, and I could talk about this forever, really, let alone for 10 minutes, but a little bit of, are we half full or half empty as we look at what they predicted and what we have? And then maybe touch a little bit on technology, education, and access to justice. These are some slides I did in 1992, I think. I was a surveyor then of large law firms. We surveyed the 500 largest law firms to see how they were using computers. And this is the trend line from 80. This is what the Dayton people faced. This is their world that they saw, right? What Lindy and Peter and the other people were commenting on. And you can look at these as you go by. 78% of lawyers, wow, use word processing. I mean, internal email, 41%. 41% of lawyers used email. 41%. WordPerfect was by far the dominant thing. It was the application. WordPerfect was the law application. That was it, right? If you wanted to go to a company and ask for money and it wasn't Lexis or Westlaw, you went to WordPerfect and asked them for money because they were the law people. Windows, 17% of, it's ridiculous. Firms with networks of any kind. People were carrying disks around in this period. Now, thinking of that space, that time, that era, this report was very, very good. I know you haven't read it recently, like all of us have, but it was written before all these things that we see everywhere around us, before Palm Pilots, before instant messaging, before the internet was anything. There was no Amazon, there was no eBay. The only major flaw in its sort of world vision as it looked forward was it didn't see the internet, which it then saw as the supernet, as expanded and bottoms up and democratic and dispersed. It thought that libraries were going to be the place that you got into the supernet because only certain people could get to it. Right? And that turned out to be absolutely false, and the power of the internet came to be because of the falseness of that prediction, because of its openness and its pervasiveness. These are some of the high points from the Dayton predictions. You can look at them. A lot of will change and improve the manner of the use of data, will change the way law is taught. Law schools will lead the profession. Students will have notebook computers. Well, we look at that and say, duh. Yeah, of course, we all have notebook computers. Faculty will be computer literate and will be like, the avant-garde. I'm sorry. Internet and decentralized information will alter geographic and institutional boundaries, and this is a distance learning point, right? And it picks up the I think we'll see in a minute. The notion is that all this distance learning activity that we've been involved in, again, Peter's been so instrumental in leading, it was thought that technology was going to make this possible. Libraries and imaging we've heard about, and then this notion that technology would be an edge for tech-savvy students and for tech-savvy law schools was also their way to get people to give them money to build a great law school in Dayton. And that's what that was about. Narrowing this down a little bit, email to enhance faculty and student communication, really that's a big yes. Right? I mean, that's everywhere. Multimedia used widely in classrooms. We saw a lot of that here. It's still a maybe to me. There's not a lot of that going on in law schools. We did a survey, John and I and some others in the ABA did a survey of law faculty members. Maybe 700 faculty members responded on the CALI website. And basically, 700 faculty members, 426 said they used PowerPoint in class. Right? And that was like the peak thing. And then everything else is drops off from there. So if you want to say how has technology predicted in Dayton penetrated the classroom, the faculty perspective, 700 sort of self-selected people who care about technology said they use, that of them, 65% of them use PowerPoint. That's not so great. Clinical innovations, I think, are patchy. We did a conference a couple years ago in Indianapolis, and Bob Oliphant got up and said, I surveyed the whole clinical world, and there's nobody out there using technology. And Bob Seibel started screaming at him, and they had a big fight in Indianapolis. It was the biggest thing that happened there since the Pacers. But there are wonderful things happening in some clinics at Columbia and CUNY and a lot of places, but it's also, some clinics are pretty standard law practices that aren't very automated. We talked about library imaging, and the distance learning revolution, I think, is well covered in other places. Here's why I think it feels half empty. And I think these are two important insights that I've experienced that I think are relevant to our way forward. And one is, I had special experience with the first one. My daughter just went through the first year of law school in my law school, right? So every couple of days she was sticking her head in and telling me what was going on. And I started to think, I experienced her life, as she went through this process. And basically, there are, 10 or 12 units with 1,000 pages of text for each unit, and 100 people and 8 or 9 faculty members, and they talk about those 1,000 pages of text over a period of 15 weeks. And it's very powerful. Very powerful. And that's not to say we shouldn't use technology and that some of it couldn't be distance. I designed a distance JD that started in the first day of class with intense local places, intense experiences at the on-site and then distance things that went in between that my faculty killed. So I believe in this, but I also am very, very cognizant of the power of culturalization and that can happen when we're all together like this, right? There's something that happens between us that doesn't happen if you're looking in from the other room, and certainly happens even a little less in terms of energy and power if you're looking at the slides and trying to read what's going on here. You don't get quite the energy and the enthusiasm. That's the second point. We make personal contact somehow, and we see each other, and we nod, and we say, hey, yeah, I think he's got a point there. It gets quiet in the room. Noisy in the room. Things are very difficult to understand and to implement in your teaching in a powerful, consistent way, those of us who care about that, and a lot of us don't. Or a lot of us just want to get through the substantive material in a sequence that makes sense. It's very difficult to do that in traditional ways, and then when you add the technology, sometimes it interferes, sometimes it improves, and it's hard to figure this out. So I think those are just difficult problems. I don't know what to do about them. So here, I've got like a minute and a half. I'm going to take John's time now. All right, so here's some successful technologies that we know about, right? And what's successful about them, I might suggest to you, is they connect people and make it easier to communicate. They grow connections. My daughter was in Dayton from 94 to 98 when she was in first to third grade or fourth grade, and she still does IM, right, 10 years later with those third graders. Right? She hadn't seen them. It's nuts. What next? All right, well, I think wireless will extend the pervasive net, and that's good. I still hold out hope for the electronic casebook. I am absolutely convinced that it's sole barrier is 1,000 pages of text per course that you have to read, and it's just painful to do it on a screen. And when screens get to as easy to read as paper, which may come someday, then that barrier will begin to fall off. The ABA distance rules will maybe begin to foster some distance learning experimentation. And then here's some ideas about access to justice and technology. Massive need, lowering barriers, students on underused resource. How do we put all this together and make something happen? This is a collaboration in Illinois that's fabulous. All these legal aid organizations and the law school, a couple of $1 million, and people building wonderful websites that basically do this. And in this model, you can see that law students and faculty members could be authors and experts, pumping information into databases that then can be sorted across markets, low-income people, legal aid advocates, pro bono advocates, and then delivered, right, in various places. And the pro se or self-help kind of screens might look like this. And behind each of those clicks might be text that was authored by students in groups that could be like little law reviews, right? Or even as employees, with clinical faculty members engaged with them, trying to understand what the best practices are. The most powerful stuff is using those document assembly things that we talked about in 1978 and actually did. And Bob Seibel, who gave the presentation an hour ago next door, did 500 wills in 1979 using a document assembly system in 1979, and now we're going to try to do it again, right? And Lexis has helped there by donating $250,000 worth of software, and maybe all this comes together around e-filing in courthouses. And when all these barriers are lowered by the digital sort of IP, TCP interconnections that we all have, maybe we can go in and do a half an hour of pro bono, or help a student do an hour or two of pro bono from the library where they're going because it's a pleasant place to be, not because there are any books there. And maybe we'll make a dent in the access to justice thing. Go to the website. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ron. I forgot to mention that one of the interesting things reading this report is you'll see in the list of consultants at the end of the report, many of the people who are at the conference, including two people we have in the room today, Ron and Peter Martin, who both contributed greatly to the report in 1993. Let's move on here. So next up is John Mayer, who hardly needs any introduction. John, whose CALI is responsible for so many of us learning so much at these conferences. I remember when Tom Bruce introduced cello in 1993, and we first saw the World Wide Web here at the CALI conference. So John is here to speak to the issues that the report brought up about technology and infrastructure in the law schools. And the report was very accurate in a lot of different ways, like Ron and Marian have said. Some of the details it got a little wrong, like predicting, well, on the one hand it said computers that faculty and staff will be using and students will be very powerful, and they are, but then it went on to say they'll need large hard drives, typically 200 megabytes. So maybe one of the lessons we learn is we don't put quantified numbers to our predictions. In looking around the website, around the web, I found John is listed here on musicportal.com, and they have him as a musician, born in 1977, and at the same time that he's putting on a conference here in Seattle, he's also on tour with Santana, B.B. King. So, John, come up and give us some of your musical expertise.
I want to run through the halls of my house.
Let me get this up here for you.
You know, I get his mail. Old girls. I love your music. It's changed my life. Are you the FBI? As fast as Ron was talking, I've had 2 cups of coffee to be awake for this session. So I hope I can keep up the same pace. I called my talk a decade after Dayton. because besides talking about the decade after Dayton, I'd like to talk about the decade after that decade. And what do I press here? Briefly, these are the points I'm going to cover. A brief look back, rising technologies, and then legal education in 2013. Brief look back. Before I cover this, I meant to bring a T-shirt but I couldn't find. That it comes from 1993. It was I attended GopherCon in University of Minnesota in 1993, and it shows a gigantic gopher swallowing the planet Earth. And on the back, it was a black concert T-shirt and had listed a whole bunch of countries: United States, Japan, Switzerland, France, and how many gopher servers they had. And there were 1,200 in the U.S. and there were 400 in Europe, and everybody thought it's Gopher World. And at GopherCon, the Gopher writers were a bunch of geeks. And by the way, there was Gopher, Veronica, Jughead, Archie. Oh, that brings back memories. The Gopher writers said, well, we've had a talk with our university council. Room got real quiet. And we've figured out how we're going to license the software. Room got real quiet. And how much it's going to cost. And that was the end of Gopher. Because they wanted to make a revenue stream out of it. At the time when Tim Berners-Lee got the CERN lab to say, have fun with the HTTP World Wide Web code. Of course, the World Wide Web is better, but it wasn't apparent in 1993 at least. All right, brief look back. The hard problems, how are we going to get all these people to have computers? How are we going to get them all on a network? How are we going to wire, how are we going to get them access? Well, they were solved externally. We didn't have to, when I started at Chicago-Kent in '87, it was how do I convince students to buy computers because they might be valuable to their learning. And by about '89 or '90, they were buying computers without us having to tell them why there was a good reason to buy computers. So the rest of the world got technology and solved some of those hard problems for us. At least it was an evangelism problem. All students had or have computers today. All faculty, well, I won't say all, right? There's some Ted Kaczynskis out there. So most faculty have students today. Everyone is in some way, shape, or form connected to the internet, right? And many do connect. I can't say all, but many do connect while they're within the classroom. They're not connected to any educational resource, of course, and I won't go there, but they are connected in the classroom. All right, another thing. Some easy things weren't easy, right? Faculty did not re-engineer legal education. And I speak like an engineer now in saying that that's what we thought would happen. This disruptive technology would come in. It would change the way we think about how we do education. The faculty would be the change agents or the recipients of this change, but they didn't. All right? Are we surprised? Law libraries did become disintermediated, and we thought that they were going to lead the charge in handling this information overload problem. How do we deal with so much information? Well, we need somebody who can organize it for us. Well, who organizes information? Well, law librarians do. And what we saw from Clay's talk yesterday was that taxonomies don't apply too well when they scale on so much information. Now, to a certain extent, Google and blogs have become ways to find information and ways to use humans to filter it, but in a very sort of imprecise or non-highly structured way. All right? Law schools don't tell students how, and I should probably underline the how there, how to study with computers. It seems kind of funny because when I started at Chicago-Kent in '87, I'll only say that one last time, we were trying to tell students or explain to them, well, this is how a computer can help you with your education. We were engaged in the education process with the student. And today, or over the last decade, we've basically abandoned that idea, that there is an education process that is unique to having access to a computer that we have to explain to students. They come with their own knowledge and skills or set mindsets and are going to decide on how they're going to approach those problems themselves. Most of legal education is still in paper, on paper, or lecture. Ah, there we go. All right. I lost my screen up front here. All right. All right, some things did change. A lot of exams are electronic. A lot of people are taking exams electronically. But then they are religiously printed out and handed to the faculty member, who then grades them on paper. You know, it seems like a natural there that if it's starting electronic, why not keep it electronic and close the loop? But we don't seem to be doing that very much as far as I know, right? All right, a lot of administrative that's where too much coffee is coming. A lot of administrative processes are electronic. Any schools where their students don't register for classes electronically, do you care to admit that? Let me put it that way. Any schools where you do not have students apply for your law school electronically. Look at that, ubiquitous. All right? That was a big deal 10 years ago, if non-existent. A lot of courses have websites. I know that's a generality, but it's not saying much that a lot of courses have websites because there's a lot of distance between here's the syllabus and here's a rich set of materials that I can get at. All right. There are more IT staff. All right. The first conference we had in '91 had 70 people, and this one has a little bit over 400, and we've been over 450 in past conferences. Not that all of them are IT staff, but there are more IT staff in law schools. But, and this is where my pessimism starts to show, very few of them are what I would call partners in education. All right. They're help desk. They're network admins, they're programmers, but only a very small cadre are educational technologists or actually have daily or weekly or daily, exposure, sort of like radiation, to faculty. That was mean. All right, let's finish this brief look back quickly. All right, the culture changes very slowly, right? I wrote it first, just that Clay said it before me, right? You can't change culture with sustaining innovation. This is also something that Clay Shirky mentioned in The Innovator's Dilemma, which is a great book, by the way, by Clayton Christensen, I think. He basically says if you just do things that improve incrementally the processes that you already have, then you're going to keep doing the things you have. You need disruptive technology, and usually from an external force, to change culture quickly, all right? True reengineering requires us or you to examine and evaluate current methods. We don't want to look at our current methods. As the executive director for CALI, I get asked quite often, are you sure that those lessons are pedagogically sound? And I have an answer, which I don't need to give here. But what I want to say is, are you sure your lectures are pedagogically sound? And so in order to change the thing that we do now, we have to take it apart and understand its pieces. But it's sort of a 100-year-old inherited system that's always been working, so let's keep doing it that way. That's the culture changing slowly again, right? All the low-hanging fruit's been picked. You know, hey, let's put our faculty directory up on the website so that spam bots can harvest the email addresses and send them around. Let's put our materials up on our website. Let's use email mailing lists to talk to our students. So, you know, all those, now that we have an infrastructure that allows communication between and among, we've said, I can do things like that. They're not particularly innovative. They're sort of the obvious technology, low-hanging fruit, all right? But finally, some predictions weren't optimistic enough, and Ron and others have touched on that. We sure didn't see the web coming, and I don't think we saw wireless coming as good as it is. It's not yet there today, but as good as it is in those 10 years. All right? I don't think we saw the growth of hard drives and computers that we did, or their cheapness, the price points. Let's move on to the next point. All right, rising technologies. Convergence. Things are converging. Well, I hated putting that word there, but certainly slower than we like. We are not at ubiquitous wireless, but we're heading towards a ubiquitously wireless world. RFID is a big deal, I think, because RFIDs are not just for Walmart. RFIDs are going to be stuck on us and on our books and our papers, and why not? Anything that costs more than $1 should have an RFID on it. And when you can then have that thing be known to the technosphere, all sorts of interesting things happen. Let me use that to say, how many different ways, if I were sort of a hacker god, could I find out that you're here in this city? Just a location sort of thing. And the list goes pretty long. If I could hack into the airlines, I could see that you took a flight here, because there's an electronic record for you on that flight. I could hack into the hotel to find out that you registered in a hotel information system. You used your credit card to pay for one of those or to buy something. You may have registered at the CALI website, and that tells this hacker god that you're here. There may have been email notices in your email or in emails that you sent that have something to do with I'll be in Seattle next week. There might be a voicemail notice. Actually, what I meant by that is you might have put up a thing, I'm out of town for the next week and won't be answering my email. Same with voicemail. Your cell phone is a walking, talking global positioning system telling me where you, or at least where whoever's holding your cell phone is at any moment. Your wireless PC is the same, can be the same thing. And certainly any email that you send or receive through those networks is telling those things. So this idea that in the future we'll have these things that locate us in time and space is crap, because right now there's 9 ways I can tell where you are. It's out there in the technosphere already. All right, I want to back that up because I want to mention video. I believe video is not the next big thing, but in about 4 or 5 years, the next big thing. It's on an arc that says we're going to be pushing video around like we push text around, and I will talk about that more in a second. Smarter tools. For that, I'm just going to refer to an article that Clay Shirky wrote called "Situated Software." I think the ability. Well, let me put it this way. Right now, I can assemble a course website by downloading some open source tools, filling in some fields, and it looks pretty darn professional. And we're at the point now where we're getting smart about building those blocks in such a way that they can actually Lego to each other instead of having to have deep programming expertise to make them work together. XML, RSS, those sorts of standards are making it easy to tie things together. And I'm talking about you, if you're not a programmer or a techie, as opposed to me. Those tools are off-the-shelf assemblable. All right, so legal education in 2013. How am I doing? Quick. So notebook, PDA, cell phone, GPS, camera, MP3 player, digital video, convergence. This is coming, right? We know this. All these things are all going to be smushed into one device. Not next year, I say, but in 10 years, they should all be on a chip or two. As a result, students are going to record everything. It will be their life as a movie. Now, likely is that they'll record their classes. Why? Well, because they can. And remember, when we had them word processors that they used in the classroom, they typed every word you said. And prior to that, when they had legal pads, they tried to write down everything that the faculty member said. So they will record everything, just for reference. All right? Faculty, if they're cognizant or knowledgeable or a little bit techie, will also record themselves, and they'll create like NFL highlights of themselves. Here's the exam review, and it's a DVD. And the students will pop it in and go, bam, bam, bam. I want to see that scene, that scene, that scene. This is totally able to do today. But I'm saying in 2013, we won't be surprised when we're doing it. Because I believe video editing will be somewhat effortless. All right? So the PC or the notebook becomes your office because whenever you're on it, you're at work. And it's also going to be a TV studio with a webcam and sound. All right? What else? Infrastructure is or will be irrelevant. It doesn't matter that this building is wired or has a projector because people will want to be online or connected wherever they are, and so they will have to carry their infrastructure around with them all the time. I went so far, and since it's like 5 to 5 on a Friday, yeah, let's go for it. Almost every PC will have a projector built into it. I mean, I've seen projectors that are the size of 2 decks of cards. Why not just reduce that down to the power requirements and have a little projector on the back of every PC, right? Law school IT will diminish to install and update in caretaker status. I'm scared. That's my most pessimistic one. All right? They're not partners in education now, and as the infrastructure gets more automated, well, all we need is for them to be data janitors. I'm worried about that. The educational technologist role will grow, but I don't see them growing in other areas. And this is a joke, of course. Microsoft will buy, actually, CALI will buy Microsoft, and we'll become, but what the reality of that is we will become more distributed and less centralized. Right now, CALI's very sort of hub and spoke, where we distribute out a CD, and it all comes from our website. But we're already working on tools that we want to push out to the ends and let lessons or lesson-like things happen without necessarily going through our publishing or vetting process. All right? Here's my boldest prediction, and to hell with not using numbers. 20% of legal education will be from a teacher outside your city. I don't know what that means. Maybe distance learning. This is 2013. 25% of that will be outside your country. We're going to start having to teach our students about global law. All right? We've been doing distance learning all along with books and reading of things. And I think that JD is turning into an MBA over a decade, perhaps. I call it JD Light. I think a JD Light will emerge in the U.S. Because everybody in the U.S. can practice law. Did you know that? You don't have to be a lawyer to practice law. It's called representing yourself or a self-represented litigant. Well, I think some of those self-represented litigants are going to become SRLs on steroids. And like Clay talked about, well, did he talk about it in the thing? People coming into doctors' offices with printouts saying, wait, here's some information I have. The SRLs are going to be coming into the court and saying, well, I read about this last night. I know what I'm doing, even in greater and greater complexity. Why not? People are self-administering drugs. Why can't they handle their own law firm? Why can't they handle their own legal problems? Why? Well, because they're going to lose. But they're going to try, I believe. Or they're going to try to use it to advocate a position, or they're going to use it to protect themselves from perceived dangers because of the number of lawyers, or because they believe that the rule of law is a better way to do something than other alternatives. And that's why I have a quote by Clausewitz. War is the continuation of politics by other means. You've heard that quote over and over. Well, my quote is, law is the continuation of war by other means. Right now in the global world, we're told, don't fight. Establish the rule of law. I know in Iraq it seems a little strange. We're going to kill you unless you establish the rule of law here. But the point is, in a 5,000 miles above the earth sort of sense, law is held out as the way to deal with our conflicts. And that means everybody on the planet will need a level of legal literacy to fight that war for themselves, for their groups, and for other things. All right? I'm almost done. I think tenure is going to erode, but I don't think it's going to go away completely. I think that adjunct aggregators, such as something like Codec and distance learning, may happen. There's going to be more crossover between practicing attorneys and teachers. I think there's going to be a rise of the guide on the side, that is to say, non-professional law professors doing teaching. And I'm almost done here, distributed distance education. So is the future predictable? I don't know. This is hard. No, I don't see any killer apps, but you never do see them, right? There doesn't seem to be much competition in legal education, except in the sense that people want, there's more people that want to learn about the law that can get into law schools. And so that pressure may spawn schools, like I said, those SRL, self-represented litigants on steroids idea. The technosphere will continue to gradually instantiate itself, and it will be used as the new delivery medium. And I mean the technosphere of the ubiquitous high-bandwidth wireless. And so my last piece is 2013 is going to look a lot like today, at least in substance, because we're not changing the way we're doing things. We're just overlaying it into new delivery methods. All right? So that's my decade after Dayton.
I'd like to now hear from the audience. Are there any? Is this on? Prediction. I'm sorry.
The recently, University, which is doing the training now. But some law professor how you do that because language. But all of a sudden I received the form at law department. I can show you. As law professor, law that indicate to me about some kind of more legal. How we can
Yes. There's something to a bunch of law schools to share lots of ideas about what the best practices for distance education as an international COD.
As a matter of fact, I've already said that your way, you are Harvard University there. I told you.
Comments?
One of the schools will I thought they already American Bar Association. I'm talking. but my question is who made that policy and how long that policy will stay there?
Our effectiveness and ways to meet the next comment.
Other comments? Questions?
Yeah, see you in 10 years. A decade after a decade after a decade after a decade.
Thank you. Whoa. Got too close to the mic. Thank you.
I know you're Seattle veteran, Jack. Jack, you know Jack? Jack is the Seattle. I felt like I was
writing